Well, listen up, record collectors. If you're a vinyl nerd, you will absolutely love AudiophileuSA.com. AudiophileuSA.com sells only excellent and near-mint vinyl records, much of it former store stock, often still sealed in original shrink wrap from decades ago. Plus, AudiophileuSA.com ships directly to your door, worldwide shipping, whether you're in Texas, Singapore, or good old Australia. AudiophileuSA.com will get you the most gorgeous looking and sounding records for your collection. That's AudiophileuSA.com. Go there now and find your holy grail. And don't forget to clean your records, people. The Groove Washer is the best record cleaning kit on the market and ensures your records look and sound their very best and leaves no residue, so your records can be stored and remain in archive quality for a lifetime. Help your records look better and last longer than you. Ask for the Groove Washer by name or go to groovewasher.com. 10% off with promo code VinylGuide10 at checkout. That's groovewasher.com. Go there now. And with that, let's get into this week's episode of the Vinyl Guide podcast.
Do you listen to and collect vinyl records? Well, you're in luck. Welcome to the Vinyl Guide, the podcast made for record nerds like yourself. Here's your host, the biggest record nerd of them all, Nate Goyer.
Oh, well, that's me. Hey, everyone, it's Nate, host of the Vinyl Guide. Thanks for listening. Thanks for downloading. A huge hello and I love you to all our show patrons from the patreon.com/Vinyl Guide community. And just for you all, we have an extended episode up there this week, so I hope you're all enjoying it. Personally, I am very pleased with this week's episode, a conversation with Wayne Perez, the official archivist for the Estate of Kevin Gilbert. Now, many of you may be raising an eyebrow right now with the name Kevin Gilbert, perhaps not familiar with that name. And if you aren't familiar with Kevin right now, I hope this conversation convinces you to seek out his work. Kevin Gilbert was a brilliant musician, songwriter, producer, engineer, and his life was cut far too short in 1996 at the age of 29. Kevin's death was absolutely tragic. It was sudden, and it left behind a series of brilliantly conceived projects that were incomplete. Now, Wayne was a friend and collaborator of Kevin's, and today he joins us to discuss the process of picking through the pieces that Kevin left behind and assembling several releases which you can all enjoy and learn more about at kevingilbert.com. Now, for those of you who are new to Kevin's work, I would recommend you start with two releases which you could check out right now on the various streaming services. First off, the Kevin Gilbert solo album, Thud, as well as a project he did called Toy Matinee. Now, both of these albums are available at Apple Music and Spotify and maybe even YouTube, but good luck finding vinyl copies of either of these. Both albums were extremely limited in their vinyl release, which of course we'll talk about today, and neither of them will likely be repressed anytime soon. However, the good news is that KevinGilbert.com, the Estate of Kevin Gilbert, is starting to make other collections available. They will be making some Thud test pressings available, as well as a vinyl release of his album, The Shaming of the True. Again, it's an amazing collection of songs. There's a lot of work of Kevin Gilbert's to check out, and all details are available at KevinGilbert.com or Facebook.com/KevinGilbertOfficial. Now, today, Wayne and I are going to talk about Kevin's history, the releases of his career, his work with solo albums, his band Giraffe, his studio, his production work with Toy Matinee and Patrick Leonard, his central involvement in Sheryl Crow's Tuesday Night Music Club LP, the bitterness, the aftermath, the rare recordings, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, and the upcoming releases from the Estate of Kevin Gilbert. And just so you know, going into this interview, I actually knew Kevin. I won't say that we were friends, but we were certainly acquaintances. We ran in many of the same circles. We spoke on several occasions, and I always found Kevin very generous with his information, his recording techniques. He was a really, really funny and talented guy. And really, nearly 25 years after his death, I still miss his musical voice and his sardonic personality. Look, this interview isn't about me, it's about Kevin, which again, whether you know Kevin or he's a new name to you, I think you'll enjoy the conversation. Also, just so you know, there's an extended interview up for our show patrons at patreon.com/vinylguide. For supporters of this show, I always upload extra stuff to our Patreon page, so for a few bucks a month, you could help support this show and get a bunch of extra content, secret episodes, and more. So if you want to hear more of this interview, go up to patreon.com/vinylguide, and thanks in advance for your support. And also one last thing, just before we get to the interview, there are a few other episodes of the Vinyl Guide that you may want to check out as well, including episode 86, featuring audio mastering legend Bernie Grunman, sharing some of the secrets and techniques of audio mastering for vinyl and more. That's episode 86 of the Vinyl Guide. And if you like archives, you come into the right place. Episodes 79 and 80 are all about the Queen archive. You ever wonder where the master tape of Bohemian Rhapsody is? Well, Queen archivist Greg Brooks knows, and he shares this and more on episodes 79 and 80 of the Vinyl Guide. Oh, and hey, King Crimson fans, check out our interview with Jacko M. Jack, episodes 111 and 112 of the Vinyl Guide. Jimi Hendrix's archivist John McDermott shares the history of the Hendrix tapes on episode 115 of the Vinyl Guide. Stephen Wilson talks about his remastering projects of the legendary prog albums on episode 124 of the Vinyl Guide. Audio nerds rejoice, a history of quadraphonic records on episode 154 and more. All these episodes of the Vinyl Guide and a few hundred others are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Sonnet, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, my voice is giving out on me. Let's wrap up the upfronts and get straight into our interview with Wayne Perez, the official archivist for the Estate of Kevin Gilbert. All right, so today on the Vinyl Guide, we are celebrating the music and art of Kevin Gilbert with friend and archivist Wayne Perez. Thanks for joining us today, Wayne.
Hey, not a problem, Nate.
I understand Kevin is not a household name, which to me is a real shame. I think everyone should really know about Kevin's music, and there's quite a bit of his music that is available, and especially thanks to you and the Estate of Kevin Gilbert for continually putting it out there. Now, before we get into the details around Kevin's life and work, just for listeners who may not know Kevin's work, can you please give us a summary, maybe a minute or two, about who Kevin was and the sort of music that he made?
Yeah, definitely. He was born in New Jersey, moved his way out to southern or central California, the Bay Area, and he picked up music very early age, and he kind of was, as everyone says, a prodigy. He just started out very young, listening to things and by ear, just being able to sit at a piano or any instrument basically throughout his life and emulate it. He ended up hanging around recording studios in his teen years and just kind of looking over shoulders of people, and that's how he got into the engineer process and figuring out how to make actual albums and how to make recordings and what it was, not just, the 3 minutes that you hear on the radio. So he was more interested in the process of it and getting the sounds, what it took to get the sounds and to get new sounds, especially with technology that was coming around. This was all in the mid 80s. So towards the end of the 80s, he formed a band called Giraffe, and they released a couple of CDs, and it got the eye of a competition. They won a competition in Los Angeles, a big Battle of the Bands competition, and they ended up going to Japan in the big world competition and came in second place there. And through that entire process, caught the eye of Patrick Leonard, who was at the time very much known for being Madonna's producer for her True Blue album and Like a Prayer. So he enlisted Kevin Gilbert, and they formed a band called Toy Matinee and released one album, unfortunately only one. But right now, to this day, a lot of your listeners may know, it's revered as being a very, very much sought after album to use to tune a lot of PA systems. A lot of engineers love it because of the way it just was produced and the lushness of the sound. But anyway, after Toy Matinee, disbanded and didn't proceed, Patrick Leonard was going in a different direction and Kevin was left kind of just to pick up the pieces. He ended up hanging out with a bunch of musicians in Pasadena, and that's where he had one of his studios, and they formed the Tuesday Music Club. You may know that because Sheryl Crow was a part of that and named her album Tuesday Night Music Club. From that point on, Kevin did some solo work and unfortunately passed away in the mid-90s, and that's where we're at right now, where we're releasing what we feel he would have wanted released and some stuff that he was actually working on at the time of his death. So that kind of brings you up to speed on who he was without getting into every detail, because as you probably know, we can spend probably about 2 hours or an entire show just on 1 year of his musical output.
He passed, I believe, in 96, is that right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and at that point, obviously it was very unexpected. Once he passed, how did the Kevin Gilbert estate go into his studio and start organizing things? I imagine the whole studio was left just as it was the night before. He was expecting to be back the next day. Everything was a bit of a work in progress still, right?
Yes, exactly that. It was a working studio where he worked and where he formulated all his stuff, and he owned this studio. So at times he lived out of there. There were sessions set up for that entire week already on his calendar. So that day that he had passed away, people were waiting to get into the studio. So to go through all his recordings, it was a huge undertaking initially. And who started it was Nick DiVirgilio, who was one of his bandmates and one of his personal friends. So Nick went through and just assembled as much as he could from what he could do. Kevin had notes here and there. You had to go through kind of his notebooks, his journals, anything that he had written down to find any type of inkling of what was what as far as a track. Sometimes tracks were laid out complete. Other times you just didn't know what they were. So Nick assembled everything and then worked from there. We got a studio log of all the recordings or what we thought was everything, and then kind of worked from there as a form of, all right, let's see what we can do now. And the first undertaking was what Kevin was working on at the time of his death, which was Shaming of the True, his rock opera, which was, I don't know, it was about 75 to 80% finished. Some songs were almost completely finished. Some songs were halfway, and other songs in between. So
right. Okay, so that was, I imagine there was quite a bit that was known from his notes or just from conversations, what he envisioned for the rest of the completion. Were there also, I guess, captain's calls that people had to make just for the completion of the project? They had to make some decision whether they, and how did they know whether that would have been aligned with what Kevin's vision was too?
That's a good question, because that question comes up a lot, because in the Kevin Gilbert collector world, there's been bootlegs traded around, and Kevin would give work in progress recordings to friends, and friends would give them to other friends, and so on and so forth. So there's some of these recordings floating out there, and a lot of people need to understand was Kevin was never finished with this. His entire body of work from the time he started recording till the time of his passing was full of re-records on his own volition. He wanted to re-record everything. He was a perfectionist, so he was never happy with anything. Even if we may think it's a gem, he may have thought it was the worst thing in the world, and he couldn't wait to get back in the studio to fix just that one part or that one thing that he just keyed on. But for Shaming, what ended up happening was there's a ton of notes that Kevin did have. And the problem was he had been working on Shaming of the True since the early 90s. So there was roughly four to 5 years of notes and different incarnations of Shaming. I mean, there's portions of Shaming of the True that I can list for you that has nothing to do with the track listing that you may know. It has entirely other songs from his career, including other Giraffe songs and other Thud songs, and he just kept on reworking it till he found a working pattern, and then he worked off of that pattern. Now, some of those songs may have been taken out or reworked a different way for a different pattern he wanted, and so, I mean, we could probably make 20 different track listings of stuff that he did. So, but yes, we did go, or initially John Cuniberti, who does all the audio engineering and remastering, him and Nick DiVirgilio, with John Rubin overseeing everything, the executive of the state, they went in and, I mean, they pieced this thing together from the notes from this structure as best they could. And I think they came out with something that Kevin would have been totally floored with and totally honored to have. Of course, we would have loved to have Kevin's stamp of approval on his own version, but I think this is the next best thing.
The process you're talking about with Shaming of the True, where he's got re-recorded songs on Shaming of the True that date back to his early Giraffe days.
And so even earlier, NRG days in '84.
Oh, okay. Now, the releasing of Shaming of the True obviously was interrupted by his passing, but how was he then able to release Thud a few years earlier, which to me, I think that's almost the quintessential Kevin Gilbert, because that was a project that he was the captain of the ship from beginning to end.
Agreed, yes.
Was Thud a difficult project for him to feel comfortable releasing?
Once again, it was one of those where he was under now the direction of the record company, and it was an independent record company, PRA, Patrick Rains and Associates, and he had deadlines, true, but he had to be true to himself once again and just say, okay, this song's as finished as I feel comfortable to release it to the public. So yes, I mean, when I put together the Thud remaster back in 2015, it was another one of those things where we're going through 20 different versions of each song because he was not happy with it from the time he wrote it, let's say in 1991, all the way till it was released or till his final version, his final Thud version in 1994. So it was, yes, he was definitely working on everything and definitely a perfectionist, but some of his demos, he owned his own recording studio and was always in some type of studio. So even his demos were multi-tracked. So it's rare to get a cassette copy of a demo from Kevin, because he was right there from the very beginning, and some of those demo portions made it up into the final release.
Let's go back a ways. Let's go back to the NRG record, because that really is his first release. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but that was a record he made pretty much straight out of high school. Is that right?
Yeah, basically. Very, very young. Made it with a couple of friends, and once again, they were just all got together and we want to make an album. And at that early age, I mean, to just come out and say we want to actually press our own album, it's pretty remarkable. For most people are in bands, or most kids are in bands in junior high and high school, and you just want to hang out and party with your friends, and let's see if some chicks will come hang out with us, and stuff like that. And these guys were actually forward thinking and thinking, well, let's press something, let's leave our mark. So that's very, very interesting.
Was that a band that played live very often, or was it just a studio band?
No, they had they played out, and they had additional musicians when they were a band that played out. They were actually a 5-piece, and they did a few performances. We have some in the archives. In fact, someone just sent me for the archives some video footage, which is very, very rare, and it shows NRG on a dance show, one of those music video dance shows that were on after school type of thing. So they're performing live on that. So it's pretty interesting to see, a multi-camera pro shot footage of NRG. But for being, 17-year-old teenagers, they were pretty rocking out there, and they seem to have a presence. And it's amazing to see where they started, I guess, and where it was to go.
And that NRG record, do you know how many were pressed?
I believe it was 500 of the actual LPs of the original press run, and Jason Hubbard, I believe he might still even have. He's he's on there. He might still have a couple of sealed ones still, from what I hear.
Okay. Do you know how they sold them or how they distributed them?
Just independently and through consignment. It was just all, word of mouth, friends, record store consignment, shows.
And not long after NRG, he started playing with Eddie Money. Was that before or after Giraffe?
That was before.
Okay.
And so,
How did
it was just, people who knew people, and he was already getting in the music industry, and as far as tapping in. So when he started doing the Eddie Money gig, it just kind of fell into his lap, and it was one of those things where he can go ahead and earn some money, earn some coin, get his own recordings funded, and that actually that's kind of how the role was for the rest of his career, where he would do projects that he wasn't necessarily fond of. He wasn't into Eddie Money's current music state, but it sure was great to get some money from touring. And Eddie Money at the time had a very popular album. He had a hit song, so sure, it was great, and it was a good experience for Kevin to get out there and see how touring life was, and see what he was in store for, and if he even actually liked it, or the what was good and bad of it, I guess you should say.
Now, you mentioned that he had a project that won, or at least came in second place in the Yamaha Soundcheck Awards. It's his band Giraffe. Tell me a little bit about Giraffe. How did Giraffe form, and what was his approach on the project?
Well, when Giraffe formed, Kevin was working and helping out at a studio called TRS in Sunnyvale. He was helping out over there, and there was a drummer there who was working with another band, and the drummer's name is Scotty Smith, and they took note of each other, Kevin and Scotty, and got to talking and realized, hey, you do music, I do music, and your stuff sounds pretty cool, and let's see what we can do. And so they got friends and local people around, and they started working on some of Kevin's music, started working on some of others, Scotty's stuff. They started doing any work that came in through the studio. They were like, let's see what we can do. They did radio jingles, commercials. So they started to work together, and it started to just gel. So Giraffe was formed from those types of sessions and from those people coming and hanging out. And Kevin had all this music, and they started to record it. And so then that was what turned out to be Giraffe's first album, The Power of Suggestion.
If I understand it correctly, The Power of Suggestion was one of the first independently released CDs at the time. Yeah,
that's what it turns out to be. It wasn't known at the time, but a year later, BAM magazine did a big story on recording and the recording process, and in the story they did list The Power of Suggestion from Giraffe as being the first independent CD, and it's pretty interesting to realize. I mean, it makes sense. It was in the Silicon Valley out there where Apple and all these software companies are, so it only goes to show that it would come from that area.
So that CD, 500 copies made.
Yes,
and that's one of the that's one of the highly collectible Kevin Gilbert items out there.
Yeah, it's highly collectible, not only from Kevin Gilbert and Giraffe fans, but from also music aficionados, people who are collecting, the first ever of something. So that's the first ever, independent CD. So there's people who want that, and as a collector, you want the best one, you want the sealed one, you want the one that no one's touched. So some copies do go up there in price. I mean, They've gone for, I've seen them for the high 600s, and I haven't seen anything lower than 150.
Jeez. Okay.
Yeah.
I better go find that one in the box in the garage. Yeah. I also have a copy of The View from Up Here.
The View from Here, yes.
The View from Here, and I believe the first run of those CDs had an error in it, a skipping error.
There was an error. I don't know if it was with that or The Power of Suggestion, but yeah, one of them had there was something where the first batch had a definite glitch in it. So there's copies out there with it, and collectors. That's one of the first things is, does yours have a glitch? Does yours skip? That's one of the first things.
What's funny is because that first batch skipped, those are the ones he started giving away. That's how I got mine.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's good to have one. It's a freebie.
Those became the promo.
With Giraffe, that elevated him, as you said, to get the attention of Patrick Leonard.
Yes.
How did that connection happen?
It was at the Yamaha sound check in L.A. So they won the Battle of the Bands competition there, and they performed with 6 other additional bands, and they got to perform 2 songs, and they won the competition and went to Japan, like I said earlier, and in and along the way, Patrick Leonard just kept on with Kevin, saying, let's do something, and we kind of both are into the same music, so it looks like we have the same path going. It's just, we have an age difference. That's the only thing. So they formed, or Patrick Leonard recruited, I should say, Kevin into Toy Matinee. It was a band per se, but it was owned by Patrick Leonard. He 100% got all the people in it, all the musicians.
Toy Matinee created one album. Do you know if that album fulfilled the vision of Patrick and Kevin at the time?
At the time, it did. It definitely did. They were very proud of it. It wasn't, from what I've told, it wasn't an album that they handed in and said, "Oh, I wish we could have had more time," or that one song, I wish we just did something different. From what I was told, it was a masterpiece once they turned it in as what you hear right now.
And the album didn't do very well, despite being wonderful. Any thoughts on why the album wasn't successful at the time?
There's a mixture of thoughts. It depends on who you ask. If you ask Kevin, he'll give you, or he would have given you his reason on that would have totally differed from Patrick Leonard's and totally differed from the other 3 musicians in the band. And of course, Warner Brothers will give you a different answer. A lot of it, during that era, a lot of people like to point to, whether it's worthy or not, but the climate of the music, how it was changing, the late 80s. It was released in 1990, so, hair metal was out. Rock was kind of taking a back seat to rap and to new urban music. So Toy Matinee kind of was coming in with a home without a home. It was trying to find its own ground. It was the Steely Dan of the late 80s that didn't have, any corporate rock radio to back them. So it was an uphill battle from the start. And, was it going to get pushed towards the new adult, oriented radio, or was it going to still try to get a rock push, or what? So I think it was just stuff that was kind of bad timing in the world, just in the climate of music.
You mentioned everyone has a different view on why Toy Matinee wasn't successful. Was that Kevin's, or did he have something more specific?
Well, if you would have asked Kevin, it would have been, everything from the look of them to the album cover to, the track listing to just anything you can pick apart about it. I think it was just, a bunch of what ifs. If we would have done this differently, I bet we would have done that. And I mean, the biggest one that he held was, for a very long time, was that Patrick Leonard, it was his project, and he kind of left it as an orphan. He kind of just got other opportunities and ran off to do them. He got the opportunity to go produce Pink Floyd, so of course he's going to go do that. Why am I going to go hang around this Toy Matinee band that I started, but I don't know if it's going to have any legs, or am I going to go to Pink Floyd, who's got, millions and millions of albums behind them, and maybe I can do something with them and propel them forward. So, I mean, you got to think of your own status, and I mean, that's kind of like Kevin. Kevin left Giraffe to go do Toy Matinee. He kind of left those guys in the back. So here was Patrick Leonard saying, I got another opportunity. I'm going to have to leave Toy Matinee. But it opened up a weird, somewhat legal battle, very small battle, but just a legal thing on, hey, Patrick Leonard owns Toy Matinee, but Warner Brothers kind of has this album and wants to promote it to a degree, and Kevin wants to promote it, so how do we come in with this middle ground? Well, if you look at the 2 music videos for it, the first one's Last Plane Out, the second one's The Ballad of Jenny Ledge. The first one, almost the entire Toy Matinee band is on there, the original recording band. On the second video, it's almost the entire touring band, except Patrick Leonard's the keyboardist. So he made sure he was in that music video. So
now, because I guess what always struck me as odd is Patrick Leonard then made Third Matinee,
Yes.
And so if he was totally bored of Toy Matinee and he went, as you said, to work with Pink Floyd and who knows what, how did this third matinee come about? It seemed to me like in my mind, there must have been a major disagreement between Kevin and Patrick on the whole project.
Well, there was bad blood from the demise of Toy Matinee, and like I said, it was semi-legal ramblings back in the back room on what to do with Toy Matinee. So, like I said, overall, these guys were given a good budget. Kevin was brought in, this young kid. Hey, let's get this guy recording, and here he is in L.A. I mean, it's just not a rags to riches story, but it's one of those dreams come true stories.
It's almost like he was being groomed a bit.
Yeah, exactly. And here he comes and kicks ass on this album, and then you kind of don't do anything. So there was some bitterness there because. And there was some stuff with publishing and with who owns what, and how much Kevin could do after Toy Matinee, who owned his songwriting, who owned his demos. There was some stuff legally that he had to look out for and to fight for after that.
In a way, isn't the story of Toy Matinee the theme of Shaming of the True?
Well, there's portions of Toy Matinee in Shaming of the True. I wouldn't say it was the entire theme, but especially Best Laid Plans, the song, that gives a good depiction of Toy Matinee. Mm-hmm. So if you go back, our listeners can go back, pause what you're listening to right now, and listen to Best Laid Plans and look at those lyrics. A lot of those you can kind of formulate what was happening in Toy Matinee or what the general feel was around that era.
Okay, we'll give them a moment to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
So Toy Matinee, just wrapping up that portion of his career, I know vinyl copies of that album are exceedingly rare. I think the only time it was pressed on vinyl was out of Europe.
In Germany.
Germany, that's right. What are the blockers right now from being able to re-release Toy Matinee? Do you think we'll ever see a vinyl re-release of that music?
No, I don't think you'll ever see. I can't say ever see. I should say I don't think you will see anything new coming out with the Toy Matinee singular name on it. What I said was all a bunch of legal mumbo jumbo if you read between the lines, but Patrick Leonard owns Toy Matinee. So for him to release anything, he would own it all. He has it all. He obviously doesn't own whatever Kevin has co-written on demos or any stuff that's out there that's in any completed form that he has. But whatever is completed or whatever is in demo form, I don't see Patrick releasing it. I wish he would. I would love to help him. I'd love to work on something like that with him. I would love to see what's out there. I know what's in Kevin's vaults from Toy Matinee, and the stuff that's in there, I would almost beg him to release. Just they got a good special edition that they could make, and it would be good. But it's not, like I said, it's not up to the estate of Kevin Gilbert, and it lies with Patrick Leonard and producer Bill Bottrell. Bill Bottrell has some recordings that are pretty phenomenal. But now to expand, though, if I could, now the estate, we've released Toy Matinee material from that era. And how we get to do that is we don't name it Toy Matinee. We have to be creative and say something like Kevin Gilbert performs the songs of Toy Matinee. Or, Kevin Gilbert, the Toy Matinee rehearsals. Something like that. If you actually look at the Toy Matinee rehearsals that we released, the acoustic rehearsals, a little fun thing for your listeners to do, no one's ever really known this. If you look at the album cover, you can kind of read what the album cover name is with the cassette tapes in there and the album covers that are placed in there. So it's kind of a little like Where's Waldo thing, but you can kind of read the album cover kind of in a hidden way there. So,
we can't. Which
albums
are not the Toy Matinee? Which specific album?
Okay, so the album is called Kevin Gilbert Toy Matinee Acoustic. You can get it on his website, kevingilbert.com. But that one is the one where you can go ahead and kind of try to find a Where's Waldo of the album cover within.
That looks interesting. Oh, there's a picture of him and Mark Bonilla on the cover, too.
Yeah.
Now, he and Mark were really quite tight at this time, and I believe there were some live Toy Matinee gigs. What was the Toy Matinee tour during that year?
Well, what happened is the Toy Matinee tour started off with just Mark and Kevin going to radio stations and doing the whole, acoustic guitar, kissing baby type thing, handshakes to all the record execs and what have you. And then they started picking up steam, especially in Los Angeles. They had a local radio station, 95.5 KLOS, had a morning show called the Mark and Brian Radio Show. And Mark and Brian were number one in LA and throughout the region, and they started playing their songs, Toy Matinee songs, and it just started picking up steam. And so this is when Warner Brothers and Kevin Gilbert said, hey, let's do this then. Let us get a band and let's promote this a little more. So they toured up and down the west coast of California, Oregon, up in just west coast. There wasn't much legs back east with the album, so there was no sense in going out there. But they did the West Coast tour, as they called it, and we're talking a dozen shows or less, and they were successful though. That's the funny thing, is they had a couple of sold out shows in Los Angeles at the Roxy, and we actually, KevinGilbert.com, we put out that performance, the live show from the Roxy from Toy Matinee, that's called Kevin Gilbert Performs Toy Matinee Live. So at least we were able to represent some facet of Toy Matinee that wasn't just the studio album. But everything that comes out from Toy Matinee, if it's not something that was a rehearsal, a live show, or something like that, if it's a demo, if it's an alternate studio track, that's got to come from Patrick Leonard and Bill Bottrell in that camp over there. KevinGilbert.com and the Estate, we're itching to do anything with it. Vinyl, that would be great. People are always contacting me and saying, please release Toy Matinee in 5.1, do it in vinyl, do it special edition, do whatever. And, my hands are tied. I wish I could.
I imagine every so often the Estate of Kevin Gilbert makes overtures to Patrick Leonard and team to see if that door is open. Yeah?
I wouldn't say overtures. We've been in different contact just to make sure that you don't release the wrong stuff, I guess.
Okay.
So there's not really a constant or a continuous conversation about what should happen or what can happen. It's kind of like, you guys do your thing, I'll do my thing, and maybe we will talk, maybe we won't. Who knows? We'll see. So no bad blood, no good blood, no neutral blood. It's just blood.
Okay. It just seems odd to me that there would be that level of resistance, especially after so many years. Again, I'm just pondering this, but
to put when I started archiving everything, and just to be clear, I didn't just archive all the music. I archived all of Kevin's physical writings, whether they were journals, notes, receipts, phone books, anything that he put pen to paper, pencil to paper, anything. We went through his computer, printed out everything like that, emails, everything. And, it needed to be done legally for estate purposes, for closeouts of funds, everything like that. But it also needed to be done to try to figure out what are all these gaps in all this music. And so it was like I said, it was just a huge undertaking to go through all of this stuff.
What's the most interesting, fascinating thing that you've uncovered being the archivist of Kevin Gilbert's work?
Wow. You got about a day. It's, I would, if I were to break it down, I would have to break it down.
You could do top 3 if you want.
I would say some of the Tuesday Music Club jams with David Bearwald and Sheryl Crow and Dan Schwartz and all the Brian McLeod, just everyone who made up the Tuesday Music Club. Some of those jams, just hearing them with scat vocals, or you can hear a little bit of the wine glasses clinking back and forth, and just to be a little fly on the wall for that type of stuff is really, really phenomenal. It's one of those things I wish I could share with people. I get my back against the wall. People say, oh, we got to hear this. And I really wish people could, but it's not like I can just stream this or say, hey, here we go. So, it's only what's legally available. But what's in there, gems, Tuesday Music Club sessions, there's some stuff that, I've been started re-archiving this stuff back in the early 2000s. So they originally did the first wave after Kevin passed away. And I took over in the early 2000s, probably the year 2000. And what's interesting is because Kevin would record in different formats, whether it would be DAT, straight to DAT, or he would go to a 4-track or use his full console, whichever method he did, all these recordings are just floating everywhere from every era, because he would just use up whatever tape he had left from, a tape from 1988 he would use in 1993. So just wherever he could get that resource. So I'm still finding stuff that I had no idea existed. Just about 3 weeks ago, I was going through a DAT that I went through Kevin's storage. He still has a storage in Hollywood, and where we keep all his belongings, all his recordings, all his writings. And so I went through his storage and I grabbed some DATs that weren't labeled, and it was odd that they weren't labeled. So I brought them home. I went through, and sure as you can bet, there was a couple of tracks on there from an album that he recorded with one of his buddies that was phenomenal. And then I went back and did my backwards research into his journals, and I was able to find some excerpts of notes that he had written about these recordings. So now I'm in the process of trying to find all these tracks, because apparently this is a full album's worth of 10 songs.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just, but all these tracks are here and there, and you don't even know it's Kevin's work at sometimes. And half of a song is here and the other half is there, and he was in the middle of joining the two. So it's very, very interesting going through the process, but it's always a learning process also. And just like how Kevin was a perfectionist, when we put together Thud, I had been working on that for 10 years. And when John Rubin, because that was my baby, Thud is that's my quintessential Kevin Gilbert. If I could only choose one thing for someone, that Thud would be it. And so once we got the green light to go ahead and we were able to license it for a quick time, and we only had one shot at it, and we could do vinyl and we could do CD, then I was a salivating dog. I was just foaming right there, and I knew already what it was going to be like. But once I got back into the archives and pulled everything I could, then it was a new game all of a sudden. And it was just like Kevin. I had a timeline, and I had to finish it by this time, or else I would have. We released a 3 CD set. I could have released a 10 CD set, and it was still wouldn't have been with everything that people would have loved. So, it's a very. I understand where he was coming from because as a fan, and I go into it as a fan every time, what would the fans want? Even though I have this material and I can listen to it anytime, I still think and believe I want to see it produced just like he would have, or just like he would have been proud of. So, but there's a ton of stuff in there, and it's just, we had to have our own deadline, because just like him, we would have just been going on and on with it.
How do you make that decision? Like, if you've got a choice, how do you channel that inner Kevin to know which path to lead you down?
Well, when the estate started releasing everything, and what they did was, the first release that they did was the Live at the Troubadour, Thud Live at the Troubadour. And that was in the late 90s. And then they followed it with Shaming of the True, and then Caviar, and on and on. But how John Rubin, who's the executive of the estate, and it was his manager at the time, how he goes about the process is, and this is kind of the mantra, what would Kevin have released? That's kind of the sits over the archive, office. And since then, since the late 90s, we've kind of modified that, because life has modified. We've grown. Kevin would have grown musically. Hopefully he would have been churning out a bunch of hits, a bunch of cool albums. But just like his peers right now, he would have probably been going back to his archives and releasing special editions and releasing out demos. And he may not have wanted to release this stuff outright, but he would have probably released it knowing this is going to help fund my new collection of albums that I'm putting out. This is going to help fund getting my studio up and running with all the modern, Pro Tools gear, recording gear. So that's kind of how we go about it. Would this stuff been released 10 years ago? No, because Kevin probably wouldn't have released it 10 years ago. But right now, or when we release things, that's under the condition of that's probably what Kevin would have been going for. And to expand on that, when we did Thud in 2015, I went through the archives, re-archived everything, and that's when I came up with The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Kevin wanted to re-release that, or he wanted to release that on his own. He wanted to go ahead and release Thud on vinyl, so we were able to do that. In that process, I found those Toy Matinee acoustic rehearsals, so I produced an album like that, and we were able to put out a bunch of different things at one time. Back then, I found even more, and what we did was we came up with a plan to shelve a couple of albums, so we remastered them back then in 2014 and kind of just held on to them. And we got the artwork ready, and I did the research, and we've held on to them till now. Why now? Because back then, with all that stuff, chances are Kevin wouldn't have released it back then with it. So we kind of sat there and said, okay, when's the right time to release this? Well, now's the right time. And honestly speaking, the fan base is half at 50-50 with this. A lot of them are saying, you should have released all this stuff back in, the year 2000. Others understand. All we can do is go under the condition that we have set in place. And so we just try to do the best, release that we can with the materials we have when we can. And just to expand also, this is the estate of Kevin Gilbert. It's not a working, functioning 9-to-5 business for anybody. So there's not a secretary there. There's not, no one running the files and picking up a fax machine. Well, no one uses faxes, but you know what I'm talking about. So everything is funded off of the previous release or the catalog that's selling currently. So it's
that's
not
very much in the spirit of Kevin.
Yeah, exactly. It's, one thing begets the other. So when people are saying, hey, why don't you release this? Why don't you release that? Well, it's easier said than done, especially when you're, if the person was living and functioning and being able to tour and or in these days not, but, in the old days of touring, when you got money and people went and saw you, then it would be more functional. But right now, we just do it as we can.
So there's a lot to unpack there. Let me just go sequentially here. Off the back of Toy Matinee, Kevin formed the Tuesday Music Club.
It was formed by just guys hanging out, musicians hanging out, and so Kevin wasn't really the creator of it. It was just kind of a collective of just, hey, we're hanging out and they were doing their debauchery, drinking, whatever, and just coming up with jams. And they were also in the process of saying, let's see where this can go. Can we make music? Can we do it? Is it worthy? So they got together like that. Mark Bonilla wasn't a part of that. It was Kevin Gilbert, Brian McLeod on drums mainly, David Bearwald, there was David Ricketts, Sheryl Crow, Dan Schwartz on bass. So that was the crux of it. Sheryl came in kind of after, not really at the beginning of it. So that's why there's a lot of controversies. It always follows it. A dark cloud always follows the Tuesday Music Club in every interview and everything that goes with it, just because of the history and of where it went to and what it became.
So how did the Tuesday Music Club turn into essentially Sheryl Crow's first album?
Well, I'm going to be very careful because it's whatever I say is going to be transcribed and read as a Bible somewhere, because there's so much red tape and black tape and rainbow tape concerning these sessions and everything like that. And I don't really know the gist of it, of what went down. And what I do know comes from David Bearwald, Brian McLeod, and Kevin Gilbert mainly. those guys that I've talked about it. So any opinions that I have about it would be skewed towards theirs. I do know what Sheryl Crow has said about it. I do know what others musicians like Dan Schwartz has said also, and my assumption of it, and it's strictly an assumption, mixed with a little bit of truth, is that I believe they got together, everything was great, everything sounded good, Sheryl came into the mix, everything was still sounding good, everything was still great. It was a condition of making her album, and people were set off in one direction thinking one thing, others thought another, and it ended up becoming a steaming pile by the end. The album was made, it was great, it was done, but there were feelings left on the studio floor, and some of them have never recovered from it, and some have gone on and have forgave, but it's always going to be a dark cloud, I think, I think that album for everybody is going to have a darkness to it. Even how sunshiny and fun it is, yeah. It's going to have a darkness to it just because of the story that you're never going to get out of it.
So Kevin and Sheryl were a couple for a while, as I understand. In fact, I think when I saw them touring Toy Matinee, she was the keyboard player of the band.
Yes, yeah.
And so... And I'm going to make an assumption by the cryptic words that you shared that the album that became Tuesday Night Music Club was originally supposed to be a collective, but then became a solo album of Sheryl's. Is that right?
Yeah, in and around. The discrepancy is who believed it was a collective and who believed it was her album and who believed the truth.
Right. Okay.
And that lies within the record company, the musicians, with Sheryl. That's what I'm saying. It all depends on who you ask on what day and what year.
Not an entirely unfamiliar story in the music business.
No, not at all.
But the album obviously was a huge smash, and I imagine a lot of those people that were part of that collective, they did reap a financial reward from it. I mean, that would have helped really fund a lot of Kevin's studio. Is that right?
Well, and therein lies the kick. I did an interview with the drummer Brian McLeod back in 2002, I believe it was, and I loved what he said about it. This was 2002, so it was 8 years after Kevin had passed away, and roughly. So we got to talking about Tuesday Music Club, and I said, what's your feeling on it now? And he said, well, you know what? I felt I was good with it then, even, I was cashing the checks, that's how he said it. It paid for everything. I mean, it was that mixed bag for them. Yeah. They got to, Kevin got to put all that money into his studio that he was building. So, and I've seen the checks. They were, some of those payouts were pretty hefty. And that album had legs, and it also had clout that ran with it. And Kevin used that clout for as much as they all want to pan everything and they all want to talk bad about the experience, which, granted, that happened to them. That's their experience. They have every right to feel how they want to feel or how they feel they're, were treated, whether it was good or bad or, in an indifferent way. But they still reaped the benefits of it. So they still got paid for their work. Now, did they get the recognition they wanted? Not entirely, it seems, according to some. And, some still have bad blood towards Sheryl. The way I look at it, I don't know Sheryl. I've met her a few times, talk with her. But the way I look at it is, what? She was Kevin Gilbert's friend, co-musician, and at one point they had a relationship together. So those three aspects were good enough for Kevin to have around and good enough to record with, and the same thing for all those guys. So I look at that music and I appreciate it. I appreciate it for what it is. I appreciate it for the time it was, and I appreciate it for the time that they put into it. I don't have the feelings that some of them may have towards it. Some fans don't appreciate that music. They want to pan Sheryl Crow. They want to put her down. I don't take that negative energy towards that. I just look at it like, just don't buy the rest of her albums, or don't promote her. Don't do anything else. Just, if you want to support Kevin Gilbert or the Tuesday Music Club guys, buy that album, enjoy it if you want, or don't. But, it's the war to me that keeps going on is just, it's exhausting to me, and I don't have the energy.
If it's been so long, and it sounds like people are starting to reckon with the past and feel okay about it, I'm assuming Cheryl probably doesn't. It may even be in a similar situation. What's holding up the release of those Tuesday Music Club demos?
Oh, that's reopening a can of worms. I mean, now you'd be susceptible to now who wrote those demos now. Now what percentage was written by who? Now you're opening it up to just a whole new thing. Now, who's going to release them? Who owns the demos? Does A&M own the demos? So now it's a weird, slippery slope. And what's very, 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 very interesting is I was talking about Kevin Gilbert's catalog. And by the time that the estate releases all of the physical media that they plan to, every year will be accounted for in a physical release for Kevin Gilbert from 1984 to 1996, with the exception of the Tuesday Music Club years, which are 1991 to 1993. So that's the only gap, and that's the only gap because Tuesday Music Club. However, if you buy Thud and you look through Thud, you can see he was writing and recording Thud through the Tuesday Music Club. So some of those demos from Thud were recorded with Tuesday Music Club members on it.
So there may be a copy of Joytown with that whole collective playing along.
And that's what it is in Thud. We released part of that stuff. So it's pretty interesting. So you do get everything there. But yeah, the Tuesday Music Club, if like I said, if there was a way to release it, I would be right on that. I mean, just think about it. Just even with Sheryl Crow's name in a marketing standpoint, I mean, people would be going for it. Just, what started it all? What started the Tuesday Music Club? Here it is. Boom, it would sell. Whether it's digital download only or physical release or album, anything.
Wow. So at what point was The Lamb Lies Down? Was that prior to Tuesday Music Club? After?
No, that was right after. That was in 1994. That was for a progressive music festival that was happening in Los Angeles. And so Kevin kind of got fired up to do... He always wanted to do The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, the Genesis album. So he got together some other band members locally, and they went ahead and rehearsed for a little over a week and came up with that one performance. And it's a pretty damn good performance. A little bit of an edited version of it, but I mean they pulled it off. There's some flubs here and there, but I mean, if you didn't know, you'd think this was a touring band. If you close your eyes, you would say like, wow, is this Genesis in the 90s?
No, it sounds wonderful. But so that was a one-off. There's one gig, one show, one tape. That was it.
Yeah, that was it. That was just one and done, as they say.
Wow. And from what I understand, that recording also impressed some of the members of Genesis. Is that correct?
Yeah, through the years, it got through to them and through different means, different avenues. But one interesting thing, I guess, is first time all is kind of being discussed, but Kevin sent his own package of media to Genesis and was inquiring about the lead singer gig. So he went ahead and sent a videotape and a DAT tape to them. And it contains some of the Lamb and also some audio from Thud and some of Giraffe, I believe. But he went ahead and sent an audition tape to them. And this was probably back in 1995.
Yeah, for probably the era of calling all stations after Phil Collins had left. So they were looking for a central figure to kind of put out there.
Yeah, and in his letter, I have his letter here where he's writing to them. He's writing to management. He's basically saying, "Hey, I hear you do need a vocalist. Well, guess what I can do."
Were there ever any other bands that Kevin tried to become part of or tried to ingratiate himself with?
No, except when he passed away, he was in his own band called Caviar. That was another collective that he had gathered with actually the drummer of Toy Matinee and Tuesday Music Club, Brian McLeod. He was in the band, and it was a collective of musicians, and they got together and formed this industrial type of music, tongue-in-cheek, and this was right before Marilyn Manson was really taking off or anything like that. So they got together and they were actually doing this type of music as a fun little outlet. And that was about the only thing Kevin did band-wise, but he was never any other live band or anything like that, or previously famous band.
What state were the Caviar tapes? You mentioned that Shaming of the True was about 75% complete. I imagine Caviar was a bit less?
Actually, Caviar was pretty much done. Caviar, yeah, Caviar was. There were a lot of the Caviar stuff was straightforward recording. It was just into the mixing stage and into the mastering, because all the music was. I wouldn't say it was easy to record, but they had it down. So there wasn't many takes. There's a lot of different mixes, a lot of different versions, I guess. But there are also some unreleased musical passages. I don't want to say that they're full songs, but some are. I guess there's a handful of instrumental Caviar songs, and then there's a bunch of musical passages that are incomplete. There's some raw stuff, and those will probably see the light of day in digital download format, because we're getting ready to roll out a whole slew of digital downloads for all this stuff.
At Kevin Gilbert's website, it looks like Thud on vinyl is now totally sold out.
Yeah, we just sold out of that about a month ago.
Got mine, but other people are going to be out of luck there. No more vinyl runs for Thud?
No, like I said, that was a one and done thing. Thud is owned by PRA Records, which is Patrick Rains, and it's a small label. It was a small label back in the mid-'90s, and it was ideal for Kevin to release Thud back then. And the estate has been trying to get the rights to do a re-release ever since Kevin passed away, basically. I mean, since the late 90s, to do a one at 5 years, or 10 years, at 15. And finally at 20, we were able to secure it. And like I said, I look back at that email often, and it was in November, I believe it was November of 2014, when John Rubin emailed me and said, we got the rights to Thud, so let's get this going. And I almost cried, because that was it. I was going to jump into this full force. So yeah, it was a great thing, but we only had one chance to do it, and we could only press a certain amount of copies. So that was it. And like I said, we just had to get it right. But being that your listeners are into vinyl, one thing that we're doing with this new wave of Kevin Gilbert releases is we're funding them through the listener, through the fans. So what we have is test pressings of Thud. And Thud came out in 180-gram vinyl, but we have 10 copies, 2 platters each, of 200-gram vinyl. So these test pressings are actually a little heavier. And what we did was I constructed a box, a collector's box, a 3/4 inch thick, 13 by 13 inch box, and with awesome artwork on the front. We got a certificate of authenticity inside, a collector's edition album flats inside. And what we're going to do is we're going to release these to the fans for probably collector value market, or roughly around $300. And we're only going to do a couple of them, and they're numbered, so people are going to, have a full instant collector's item. And we're offering this to fans because, number one, we just have test pressings. What are we going to do with them? Number two, there's fans who love this stuff. They want this stuff. So we went the extra mile and created a package for them, and so that they can actually put this on their shelf, and it's not just something that's in a brown bag type of thing. And, we put not a UPC code, but we actually have a catalog number on it. So it's a promotional catalog number that we attached. So we're going to do this through the email list and probably through the website, and just kind of give the fans something in their hands that, is very unique. And we're going to follow that guideline, and we're going to release more things to the fans from Kevin's archives and from his warehouse, from his studio. So fans are going to be able to collect, be able to, purchase autographs and original CDs that are out of print, and just other things from his studio that you never thought you could own before. And we're going to do that in a nice, tactful way, but it's also a way so that we can do this last wave of releases.
All right. Well, you heard it, folks. I'd also recommend going to facebook.com/Kevin Gilbert Official, liking that, and then you'll see these new announcements on your Facebook feed. Let me ask you this, Wayne, that the sign that said lawnmower and gardening supplies outside his studio, is that going to be one of the giveaways?
I wish it was. That would be in my studio. That no longer exists, unfortunately. Kevin's studio was sold back in 2004. And a little bit of trivia is Kelly Clarkson's Breakaway album was the last album to be recorded there, and under his ownership, and which was pretty. I was there for that last vocal session, so that was pretty cool. But his studio was sold, and everything was sold out of it for the most part. And what wasn't sold was either trashed or given away. And unfortunately, the sign did not survive. So. I wish it did.
What were the sessions that were booked the week that he passed?
Spock's Beard, progressive rock band Spock's Beard. They were going in there, and I believe he was going to be mixing for a band called Merv.
Oh, yeah, from the Limbo Maniacs.
Uh-huh. And he also went to Tears for Fears concert the week before. I remember he had a notebook page that was his entire calendar for that week. He had a dentist appointment that following Monday too. So, but yeah, I mean, he was just doing all those just day in, day out session type things like that.
Well, again, Wayne, I want to thank you for sharing all that information on Kevin, and I hope that we've been able to inspire some folks to look into his work. I've always enjoyed the work of Kevin Gilbert, and I had a very unique privilege to be able to follow it from pretty much the very beginning, and to see the arc of who I believe was an absolute genius. And I do want to thank you and the rest of the folks involved in the estate of Kevin Gilbert for keeping his music alive and continuing to put the sort of music out there and make it available for us to enjoy for years to come.
No, thanks a lot, Nate, and thanks for keeping a show like this, music appreciation, going, because especially in today's age, times and stuff, I mean, we need music. We need to take our minds somewhere, even if it's political music, even if it has a message. I mean, we just need to lose ourselves sometimes and drift off and go into a different world. So thanks for keeping a show like this going, because it helps everybody.
What do you think Kevin would make of the current state of the music industry?
Where do you want to start? Give me a pick and a hammer and some dynamite. I mean, he'd be going to town. I don't know if per se he would be. I'm sure he'd probably be telling his political view, but I think a lot of it would be a lot of tongue in cheek. Let me get out and be this dumb idiot who just makes fun of this for you and show you how stupid you are, whatever side you're on, whatever political spectrum you're at. I think he would just make fun of it just to slap you in the face and say, look in yourself, look at your inner self and see how dumb you are.
But I mean, even the music industry, just there's the lack of major labels that have pretty much disintegrated these days. Things like Spotify or SoundCloud.
I think he would be into it. I don't think he would be. I think his perfectionism would not be solely into streaming, because he would want the highest quality. So right. I think he would reluctantly be added to streaming, but I don't think he would be a proponent of it. I think it's too iffy. If you get any wishy-washy in the stream, it's not a good thing, I don't think, for him. So I think sonically he wanted the best he could, to just hear the best, and that's why he kept re-recording a bunch of stuff.
Do you know if he had an opinion on the vinyl record format?
He loved vinyl. He always wanted Thud in vinyl, and so when we did Thud, that was one of the first conversation that John and I had was, how do we do it in vinyl? How do we make this economically viable for the license agreement that we have, and for also a price point for the fans. And that was we went back and forth on that for many, many weeks, and with different pressing plans, and we didn't want to cut corners. And so that was a very, very challenging topic, and we got a lot of kickback on that also, and feedback, because the vinyl wasn't priced at a small price. It was $40, and originally you could only get it if you bought the bundle with the CD, and that was just because of the licensing agreement. There's nothing we could do about it. So how we put it on sale, that's how we had to put it on sale. So, and like I said, I can't go into all details, but that's just what the agreement was. So when we put it out vinyl only, it was $40 for a 2 LP set, which, like I said, that's pricey in today's vinyl world, but it's a one-off collectible. It was instantly a collectible once it came off of the assembly line there. So,
right. How many were made?
500.
Oh, okay.
500 vinyl. So we had an opportunity to number them, and it was one of those like, no, we don't want to start measuring people's collections like that, where, you know, I got one under 100 or I got one under 200, or we just said, no, let everyone be even, whether they're the first one to get it or the last one to get it. So so it just, we put it out, and since Kevin always wanted Thud on vinyl, he always wanted it on vinyl, so we honored that. That was one of the, like I said, that was one of the first conversations we had, was how to get it on vinyl for him. So I'm really proud of that, and it was a labor of love, really, for everybody involved, just to get Thud out there and put it out and put it in everyone's hands so that they can have demos and they can have his writings and everything like that. So that was a fun one.
That's absolutely beautiful, and I'm really looking forward to getting my. I think I ordered one of the last copies available just the other week when I saw there were. The message went out like, oh, you better get in now. I'm like, oh shit.
To be honest, I probably was right behind you, because a lot of people don't even realize this, but I go ahead and I buy my own copies also. I mean, I get my, you know, preview and my promo copies and stuff, but I'm right there behind you. I once we put out the announcement that we were down in copies, I think we only had 50 left at the time when we made the announcement. I went ahead and put the announcement out, and then I went and purchased a couple copies myself, just because I just wanted to make sure that, you know, after I wore out my other ones, that I still had something to back them up.
Very good. Again, thank you so much, Wayne, for doing all the work, and we really are enjoying the output, and we look forward to hearing what else is up your sleeve over there.
Yeah, definitely. Keep in touch.
That's amazing. Wayne, thank you so much for joining us here on the Vinyl Guide podcast. Again, there is an extended interview available to patrons of the show at patreon.com/vinylguide. Please join us up there if you can. And of course, go to kevingilbert.com or point your Facebooks at facebook.com/KevinGilbertOfficial. Like it and be advised when there is new Kevin Gilbert material out there. They're putting a bunch of stuff out on streaming, and it sounds like there's some test pressings of Thud coming out, as well as a vinyl version of Shaming of the True, which I can't wait to hear. All right, thanks again, Wayne, and appreciate all the work of you and everyone involved in the estate of Kevin Gilbert. And that's it for this week's episode of The Vinyl Guide. Thanks again for tuning in. Again, patreon.com/vinylguide is a perfect way to be able to help support this podcast. And of course, you would then access all sorts of extra content. And if you're not in a position to be able to do that these days, which I totally understand, please do me a favor, share these episodes on social media, and even write us a nice review. Go up to Apple iTunes or podcasts or wherever you get them. Give us 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10, whatever you can. Write something nice. That is always appreciated. And we'll be back shortly with a brand new episode. So until we talk next time, keep spinning. Cheers.
That's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Send your thoughts to Nate at thevinylguide.com or follow or tag us on Instagram at Vinyl Guide. Until next time, keep spinning.